Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Passion in Motion podcast. I'm your host, Mutsa, and today I am joined by Shannon Jackson. Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
How you doing today?
Great. Trying to stay cool in all this Texas heat.
Hey, I can believe that. I can believe that. Well, you know what, listener, today, again, Shannon's gonna be another great person to have a conversation with. I'm really excited to kind of get to know more about your life and your experiences, both personal, professional. Hear about. I've heard you've been on a lot of adventures in your life, so I can't wait to hear about all of them. So yeah, just excited to kind of get started here. So let's maybe get to know you a little bit more. So generally speaking, what's your current profession right now?
My current profession is nothing. I just retired from the Navy. I was in the Navy for about 28 years and I just retired after doing that. So right now I am just living my best life. I don't really have any work that I'm doing because I'm getting to find out that working is great, not working is better. If you
For real.
And so I'm just doing a lot of my passion projects right now. But my previously, like I said, I was in the Navy. I was a medical planner, healthcare administrator, and most of the time I was in the Navy, I did lots of international development. So I was working
Mm.
really closely with State Department and doing a lot of work with USAID and WHO. So I've done a lot of work in my past with health system strengthening. So that's kind of my background.
Okay, cool. No, that's really amazing. Yeah. 28 years in the Navy, you said?
I know.
I can't wait to hear more about that. So, okay, so we're gonna lead to that moment, but did you always want to be in the Navy? Like, what was your profession that you're like, you know what, when growing up, this is what you want to be?
So it's interesting you ask that question because when people talk to me, kind of like the things that I've done, it's like my whole life and my whole career has kind of been a unicorn. It's been pretty
Mm.
unique in a certain way. So when I was growing up, aging myself here, we used to have telephone books and they were like this thick. And so I would go through the telephone books and find every kind of doctor that I could. And I'm like, I'm just going to call these doctors because I'm going to be a doctor.
Mm.
I grew up watching The Cosby Show and I loved the fact that he was an obstetrician. And I was like, I think I want to do that. Did not happen. In high school, I was in Navy ROTC throughout high school, so I was kind of familiar with the Navy. Actually, I wanted to be a filmmaker. So
Oh,
that's another
wow.
thing I wanted to do. I wanted to go and write films and be a screenwriter. And so I got accepted into Florida State University. I was living in Florida. I grew up there. But then I was like, Florida State University is in Tallahassee, which is only about 80 miles from my house, and that is not far enough for me. I
Mm.
think Tallahassee can't hold me, or the state of Florida. I need more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I joined the Navy, and a lot of my joining the Navy had to do with the fact that I really love Star Trek. I'm a
Interesting.
huge Star Trek fan, and I have my whole left arm, my tattoo sleeve is all Star Trek.
Wow.
So I'm a massive Star Trek fan. So I grew up kind of watching Star Trek Voyager was the first Star Trek that I grew up watching. And so Captain Janeway was the first female captain. And I was like, I want to be like Captain Janeway. I want to
That's
go
awesome.
around. I want to see all these places, right? So in the opening of Star Trek, explore strange new worlds. That was
Mm-hmm.
me. I wanted to go out and I want to go places where no one had ever been and kind of have this major adventure for my life.
I love that.
And I
Is that what
thought about,
inspired you to be a filmmaker?
oh no, Star Trek, no, no. I don't know. I'm a writer. I used to be a writer. I'm like a recovering writer right now, and I've always just loved to make stories.
Okay.
So I really wanted to be in film, and so I said, okay, maybe I'll be a doctor, maybe a filmmaker, maybe I'll be a diplomat. I didn't know what a diplomat was, but I wanted to do that. So I was going to join the Air Force, and then the Air Force was like, yeah, if you join the Air Force, you can go all these great duty stations like Nebraska. And I'm like, I don't think that's for me.
Mm.
And the Navy said, we have these great places in Japan and in Iceland and in Puerto Rico, and you can travel the world. And I said, sign me up. So basically, that's how I ended up in the
I
Navy.
see. Okay. Wow, that's really interesting. A lot of people were inspired by the Star Trek phase or like that period because that was really great, a great cinematic time, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, Wait, you said you have a tattoo of Star. What do you have?
I have many things. And so I have a, like, this is
Awesome.
the USS Discovery. And then I
Ah,
have a Klingon bird of prey. And then I have some Borg language. And I have a lot of stuff over here.
cool. Wait, like, okay, growing up, like, were your friends also into Star Trek, or you were like one of
No,
those kids? You're like, you are weird for just liking Star Trek. Like, how was that?
it's funny you asked me that because I don't even know if that ever came up in my life. I don't know anybody ever asked me that question until I was an adult. And then I had all these tattoos. People are like, oh, you like Star Trek? And I'm like, yeah, for like 40 years.
Hmm.
You know, so
That's
yeah.
really interesting. So you said it, so you love it so much because of this one character that at that time really spoke to you? Was that like the introduction to it? Or like how did you even stumble upon it?
Yeah, so I kind of knew about Star Trek, just kind of being in the world, and I really like in the show Nichols. She was the black female that was on the very first Star Trek original series, and she was just really inspiring. But I
Mm,
never really got into that series because I wasn't alive. And then when
yeah.
Next Generation, where Captain Picard came, I kind of got into that, but I was a kid running around on my roller skates, listening to Madonna in Live Oak, Florida. So I wasn't really into Star Trek.
Yeah.
And then when I was a teenager, Star Trek Voyager came out, and somehow I just heard about it and I loved it because I had that female cap,
Mm,
and she was like so diplomatic and she was such a great leader. And I loved her teamwork, and I loved how she led her team and how she led her ship and how she lived her life. And I was like, I want to do this. And at the same time, this is when I think Bill Clinton was in office and Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State. So I was like, man, that's like similar, right? The things that they're doing on Star Trek is what, Madeleine Albright is doing with her folks in the State Department. And I was like,
mm.
maybe I'll be a diplomat. And I did, and it kind of funny later in my life, kind of all that came together. All these things I wanted to do.
Wow.
So yeah.
I can't wait to unravel the full puzzle, the full masterpiece. Okay, so I always think for me, I love watching TV and resonating with people that I watch. We all get influenced by role models or people that we want to emulate. You brought up like watching the Cosby Show and how that made you want to be a
Yes.
doctor. Star Trek, you made you want to become, I guess, a diplomat. And
Yes.
all and an adventurer or an explorer and like a leader and stuff like that. Do you also believe that it is important for representation in TV? Because it sounds like these people really resonated with you, right? And the importance of
Yes.
representation when it comes to media and like who kids look up to. Because a lot of people make a big deal of it, and some people are like, it doesn't really matter. So like, in your life, do you think if you never really got into Star Trek and Bill Cosby, your life could have looked completely different? Or do you think it would have ended up in the same place?
I don't know. I think it would have looked different because I don't think I've ever would have. So to kind of go back a little bit, I always I lived pretty close to a public library, and one thing my mom did was she really supported my passion and my love for reading at a
Hmm.
very young age. So I would go to the library all the time, and I would pick up books. They had this, like, I'm dating myself, but these National Geographic books on different countries, and so I would go read about a different country every day. And I was like, I want to go to Peru, I want to go to Bolivia, I want to do these things. I got to get out of this
Hmm.
small town. And so I think being able to see someone on TV that was doing a similar thing. It was this character that she was out there and she was meeting these different cultures and she was going to these different planets. And I was like, yeah, I could do that too because she's a female, I'm a female, I can do that. And so I think that it is important to have good role models. I think representation is very important. Right now, I'm pretty involved in the whole scene with acting and television because my son is an actor, and so I've kind of
Yeah.
seen how that works out. Right, I've kind of seen how it really does matter. Representation matters, but you have to have people who are thinking in that way. Right, so it starts with your
Hmm.
writers being people of color or people who have adversity or people who are just different.
Yeah.
To be writing roles and writing TV shows and writing movies that are representative of everybody.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a whole system. You have to have actors who are going to be on TV that people can see themselves in that actor. And then you have to have those roles there as well.
Yeah.
If
It's all
that
about
answers your
the.
question.
It
Yeah.
does. Yeah. I guess it's all about authenticity, right? It has to feel authentic at the end of
Yes.
the day.
Yes. It has to feel authentic. And I think that I love kind of Hollywood's a weird place right now, but so is America.
Yeah.
But I do like, it happened when my kid was about 12 years old. He started really acting professionally. And that was about the same time as Black Panther
Ah.
came out. And so it was interesting to see when you had those kind of roles being written and then you were casting those sorts of actors, kind of how that all trickled down. And I think that we need more of that, not less of that.
Black Panther did a lot for people.
Yes.
It did so much.
Yes.
I don't even know, I don't think it's actually even talked about enough what Black Panther did. First of all, for Africans, and then even like African Americans, I think just like the acceptance of I am African or I have African roots.
Yes.
That was never like okay, so I'm from Zimbabwe, right? And that's I kind of have that already to an extent, but coming to America was a whole new experience because now I'm learning different things and people's different experiences and stuff. And so it wasn't necessarily cool to claim your Africanness to an extent. And then when Black Panther came out, You saw people wearing African print to the cinema. You saw people really embracing what the movie represented for
Yes.
everybody. Anyone black was like
Yeah.
Black Panther is, it didn't matter what black you were. It was like, this is for us and this is great. It's done
Right.
well. It's about black excellence. Just the message of it, right? And I can't imagine being a child and watching that movie and just seeing this and like just what it did for you and what it's done for a lot of kids just looking
Yes.
at that, right? It must be awesome because we didn't have that growing up, you know?
Exactly, exactly. And so that I do agree with you. It's definitely a turning point. And so I don't know, I love it. When I was doing Halloween this past year and a little Asian kid came up dressed up like Black Panther, and that was like the best thing. I was like,
Exactly.
yes, I love this.
Yeah, no, it became really cool. I mean, it's always been cool to be black, but it became really cool to be black and African. It became really
Yeah.
cool. So I
And then
love that.
yeah, and then what you saw happening on the other side of that in Hollywood, just as far as the kind of auditions you saw, like my kid, is black, is a brown kid, and so you saw more roles being written for brown kids. You
Hmm.
saw, things happening, and so like that is the way that things can work for and positively and for the better, right? If
Yeah,
you see yourself being represented, and then other people take note of that, and they start making more films and more TV series that kind of showcase all this diversity that we have. So it's
100%. Yeah, we stopped being like, side characters or I still think I
right.
still think there's a long way to go.
Yes.
One of the missing pieces that I feel like is still not there, especially in Hollywood when it comes to like black representation is like series that show a group of black male friends navigating life. I think for like there was girlfriends,
Yes.
that was there, but there wasn't any. I don't think there was an equivalent of girlfriends for guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've tried to think about what show gave like a good representative feel about a group of just friends, just guy friends navigating life together and growing together and all that stuff. They're not. I don't think those are present unless if you know any, but I don't. I couldn't remember it. I couldn't think of any.
I could think of one, but I don't remember. I was actually thinking about this the other day. There was a show that had the gentleman who just passed away. He was
Malcolm and Eddie, right? I think that's the
yeah,
one.
yes, Malcolm and Eddie.
Yeah.
And I really liked that show a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about that recently. I was like, I don't know of many shows that are like that
Yeah.
for men, and so I was thinking about that one. Yes.
Yeah, so it's just I don't know. I think there's so much space for it. I don't know why it's not happening or why it hasn't really because Malcolm and Eddie was a great segue to that, right? Where like
Yes,
it's like, okay,
yes.
why can't we just have a group of young black male friends just, trying to
Well,
figure life out?
I think that your words here are a call to all the people out there, right? It's a call to those young screenwriters or people who are thinking about this. That's the kind of stuff that's missing. So
Yeah.
that's an opportunity, everyone.
It is. It is an opportunity. And it'll be really cool to see because I think that's why I don't know if you like are up to date with like streamers and streaming like Kai Cenat and all those people,
Hmm.
you know. I think that's why they've become so popular because the reason why, they're like the younger generation, but I love watching their streams because at the end of the day, they're just young guys living their life, and the more
Yes.
money they make, the more things they get to experience as a group of, and most of his friends are like, they're all like young black kids, just showing their creativity, just do whatever they want, and just like,
Yeah.
so I think that's what it's become. I think maybe, so I think we've always needed that, and maybe they're now filling that space, but anyway, we can talk about that forever. So going back to you and your experience in the Navy. So how was your introduction into the Navy? Like when you first got in and like let's say your first few years, because I don't know how it goes. Like, do you go through like a really intense training period? Do you have to know how to swim? Do you have to be a strong swimmer to join the Navy? Do you not have to be seasick? I don't know what I don't know, like what kind of stuff goes in the Navy.
So funny story. So people always say, I'm like, well, I can swim enough that I probably would try to like, save my own life, but I can't swim great. I'm not like the Michael Phelps of swimming.
Yeah.
And people are like, but you were in the Navy. I'm like half the people in the Navy probably can't swim. So to answer your
Mm.
question, yeah, so you basically you go to I enlisted right out of high school. And so I went to basic training in Chicago and I did that for a couple months. And then I went on to my next school where I learned how to be a hospital corpsman, which is like a medic, which I ended up in medicine, which,
Mm.
was something I wanted to do when I was a kid. And I had that training for a while. So I joined the Navy because I didn't want to have to sleep in a tent. So I didn't want to join the Army. I didn't want to be outside walking.
Yeah.
And then when I joined the Navy and became a corpsman, they said, you're going to go and you're going to do, some time with the Marine Corps. So
Mm.
one of my first duty stations, I went and I did a couple months with the Marine Corps. And I remember I cried. I called my mom crying because I said, I joined the Navy. I didn't join the Marine Corps. I don't want to have to go do that.
What was the difference? What was the major difference between the two?
It's just a completely different service. And so the Marine Corps and the Navy have a relationship where the Marine Corps is a part of the Department of the Navy, but the Marine Corps is all about um, a lot of war fighting in a different way, like short-term war fighting and that sort of
Mm.
thing, where the Navy is all about like making a presence on the sea. So it's a different role, different responsibility, but we have a really tight relationship. And so the Marine Corps does not have its own medical assets. And so Navy assets, doctors, nurses, corpsmen support the Marine Corps. So that's how I ended up
Mm.
being with the Marine Corps, as I was supporting them as one of their medics for a unit. And it
Mm.
turned out to be phenomenal. Like I cried and I didn't want to run. I didn't want to run. I didn't want to be outside. I didn't want to be in a tent. But anyway, it worked out fine. But after I finished that, my first major duty station was in Iceland.
Wow.
So I don't do anything halfway. I do everything major.
Yes.
So when they said, hey, you got to pick where you want to go next, after you leave school, they were like, you can go to California or to Florida or whatever. And I'm like, I left Florida, so that's not an option. So I said, where's the furthest place on this list? And Iceland was it. So I did that. I went to Iceland as my first duty station.
That is so cool
Yeah.
because again, you spoke earlier about looking at National Geographic magazines and the
Yes.
countries, and you're like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going as far. I want to see. You know, one thing I wonder is, so what drew you to wanting to travel outside of the country? Like, what drew you to wanting to explore all these different places? Because a lot of people don't have that draw, especially at a young age.
People don't, and I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense to me why you would not be curious. It's a curiosity. Like my grandfather always used to say that I have itchy feet. I
Hmm.
don't know if you've heard that term before, but
Yeah. Yeah.
they just can't be still. They have
Mm-hmm.
to be going around. So yeah, I don't know. I've always had a curiosity and just a love for people and
Mm-hmm.
differences and similarities in people. So I've always wondered what it was like, living someplace else in a different country. Like what would that be like? And so kids today can't really appreciate how I tell my kids that like when I was growing up, I didn't know what was going on in Britain or in South America or South Korea. Like I didn't know what was going on in the state next to me, right? Because
Yeah.
information didn't travel the way that it does now. And
Yeah.
so it was a little bit more of, having that wanderlust and that kind of curiosity because it wasn't so in your face. You had to go someplace to learn about it, like
Mm.
unlike now it's a little bit different. So I don't know. I think just something I've been born with that. I was born with that desire and that feel that I needed to just be curious and see what else there was.
I think for me, that's the essence of being a human being is having that what, right? Because I feel like we all have to. Yeah, we all have to move and travel and see what else is out there. So before joining the Navy, had you actually had an opportunity to like leave America to go
No,
somewhere, or was that your first? Was Iceland your first
Iceland was
international
my
travel?
first. Yes, it was, and I just and I think about it now because my mom was like she, I guess made the mistake or maybe not made the mistake of raising me to be very confident and feeling like I could do anything I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And she always was like, "Oh yeah, just do it." She always used to say, "Somebody's gonna do it, so why isn't it you?"
I love that.
And so I've always kind of just lived by that mantra that I could just try anything. And I think that the more scared I am of doing something, the more I have to do it.
Mm.
I don't know if that's a good trait or a bad trait, but it's a trait.
Yeah.
So, when the chance came up to kind of, go as far as I could, I took it. I didn't have any fear of doing it. So,
Yeah. That's an awesome message from your mom because again, a lot of parents would hold their children back from even leaving their state because they're like, we don't
right,
know what's out there. What if something happens to you? And she's
right,
like, you know
right.
what? I've raised you well enough to be a free bird. Go out there and and fly. And that's exactly what
That's what
happened.
she did. And now I look at my kids who are about the same age I was when I left home, and I'm like, no, you can't. You have to be with me. But I let them do their thing. But I'm like,
Yeah.
my mom was crazy. How did she let me just go?
It's a very scary thing. I mean, to have your parents like have your child just go into the world and you don't really know what's out there and like
Yeah.
it's only natural to feel that way, I believe.
Right,
So okay,
right.
so how was Iceland when you're like how long were you stationed in Iceland?
So I went to Iceland and I was there for about 2.5 years. And that was the
Oh,
first time that I had left the country. And it was great. Like I just actually got back from Iceland last week because,
wow.
when I was there, I married my husband. So I guess I liked it a
Nice.
little bit.
Yeah.
And so it was amazing. So when I was in Iceland was about 30, almost 30, 28 years ago. And it was a very different place. There
Mm.
wasn't very many people of color. The only people you really saw of color were people that were on a Navy base, with us. And so Iceland's pretty, it's kind of all the same. Now it's much different. Now they have a lot of diversity, but when I lived there, they didn't. But I
Mm.
never felt like that was an issue. And it was just a really great time. And Iceland's a beautiful culture. They're beautiful people and they're super nice. And yeah, it was a good time. And I learned how to speak Icelandic when I was there. So
I
that
was
was
gonna ask, like, if you had to learn the language,
I
like,
did. I did. I just went back and like last week when I was there, I was talking to people and they're like, you haven't lived here in like 20 something years. Your Icelandic is still good. I'm like, I don't know why, because my brain is bad.
wait, because you said your husband's from there, or
He's
was
from, yeah,
so like, do you guys speak like in what's the
we
language
do.
called from Iceland?
Icelandic.
It's Icelandic. Okay.
Yeah. And we do speak Icelandic to each other, but we speak English to each other too. And yeah.
Okay. Did you learn? Did you teach your children Icelandic as well?
So my kids only spoke Icelandic when they were little, and then they went to school in Japan. And
Wow.
then they went to international school. They learned English. So at first they learned Icelandic, but now they're trying to learn Icelandic over again. So one of them actually speaks pretty well, and the other one doesn't speak as well, but he understands still. So
That is
yeah,
so dope. So how many languages like can you speak and can they speak now? Like, or
I
understand at
only
least?
speak I only speak English and Icelandic very well.
Mm-hmm.
I speak Spanish. Like I can get by. I speak Spanish all right. I think I speak Spanish better than I give myself credit for. And then I taught myself how to speak Russian a long time ago,
Wow,
so
that's
I can
cool.
still read and kind of get by some conversational Russian now.
Nice. And
Yeah.
then so I assume that when you're traveling around the Navy, your children were traveling like they were also traveling with like how many
Yeah.
language did they get to learn growing
I
up?
think one of them just walked in. I think that he only speaks Icelandic and he speaks English, but I don't think he remembers any Japanese.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Because one of the things that I would love to do for my when I have children is I want them to be like multilingual, like 5 languages
Oh my
minimum.
gosh. I think that's one of the best things you can do. If you can, when you have kids, if you can just expose them to as many different cultures as possible. And not
Yes.
everyone can travel, and I understand that, but there are typically always things going on in cities where, there's a this day or an Asian festival or this or that. If you could just expose yourself to more cultures, especially exposing your children, I think that's one of the best things I did for them. I hope that they would say that as well. I think they do think that. Like, my mom pushed me out into the world when I was 18, and that was cool. But when
Yeah.
my kids were 6 years old, I said, hey, no, 4 years old, I said, you're going to Japanese school. You're the only black kids. You don't speak Japanese, but I don't know what to tell you. Figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And they figured it out, and I think they're better for it.
I think so. I honestly do believe that children grow up smarter if they understand multiple languages.
Yes.
I think it's a different muscle for the brain to
Yes.
flex and it makes you navigate the world differently as well, right?
Yes.
I feel
Yes.
like it's a superpower because I speak like about 3 languages,
Oh,
and
very cool.
I feel like I can hang out with it's also like different personalities. I feel like okay, my
Yeah.
in English I'm this personality, and in Shona I'm this personality. When I hang out, people speak Shona from Zimbabwe, like in this country. It's I think it's a great connector to
Oh,
be able to
yes.
like connect with your people, other people, because nothing really binds people more than language, right? Language is
Right.
the true binder
Yes.
for anybody, right? That's what we
Yes.
have. That's why we can talk and speak, and that's the whole reason. So, I think yeah, children learning multiple languages, I think it's undeniable skill, especially the way the world is going as well. Like the more global we get, and the more meshed up we all get, being able to communicate with as many people as possible, I
Right.
feel like it's becoming a necessity. I feel like just knowing how
Right.
to speak English is just
I mean,
it's the bare
and you
minimum.
exactly, you talk the bare minimum, and talk about it being a superpower. I think that is absolutely right. I think also some things that I think is common sense are not so common. And as I travel around and I do a lot of work in foreign countries and with different people from all over the world, I think that that's one thing that I really tell parents to, like, get your kids involved with languages and with different cultures, because I assume that people know how to talk to everybody like they got some sense, but that's not the case. And
Nah,
so,
it's not real. It's
anyway,
not at
that's not
all.
the case. And so I'm also finding that because my children had this very multicultural upbringing, they they can meet people where they are very easily, and they can adapt to people and adapt to situations and adapt to different cultures in a way that I think some people have difficulty. And I think that's just because being exposed and stepping out of your comfort zone and trying to speak Spanish or trying to learn a different language or trying new food. I mean, all of that's just really important.
It really is. No, that's so great. So, in the 2 years that you were in Iceland, did you travel back and forth to the US, or you actually stayed there the entire time, like you're gone for the entire 2 years?
I think that I came back to visit my mom once, and I think that once me and my boyfriend at the time, my husband now, went to visit London. But no, for the most part, I just was there. I was just trying to suck it all up, and I mean, it's a lovely, lovely country.
Yeah, it's cold though, isn't it? Like, what's the weather like?
It's cold-ish. Okay, it's cold. My
Mm,
husband will say that it's not, but it is.
yeah.
But it never gets crazy cold. So Iceland has the Gulf Stream that comes up over it, and so you will get. I mean, I think maybe the hottest it ever got there was probably like 60s.
Well, that's not even that hot.
It's not hot.
That's not even that
Exactly.
hot.
And my mother-in-law, my husband, like, oh, it's nice today. I'm like, it's like 55. Like, that's still cold. But yeah, and
Yeah.
it doesn't. I mean, I lived in other places, like when I lived in Chicago and then when I lived in Norway, it's much colder than it is in Iceland. So it's not terrible.
I can imagine. So you mentioned Japan. So did you go to Japan right after being in Iceland?
No, so we were in Iceland and then we came back to Washington, D.C., and I did some work at an organization that doesn't even exist anymore, but it was a pathology institute that did amazing work in the area of pathology and forensics
Mm,
and that sort of thing. And then I came to Japan the first time. I was down by Hiroshima. I
oh,
left
nice.
Japan, came back. I was in California for a while, and then I went back to Japan where I
Mm.
was on a ship and I spent a lot of my time. The second time I was in Japan, I was on a ship, and that was probably one of the top five most amazing experiences I've ever had in my life. I'm so happy that I did it.
That's so cool. How long were you on the ship for?
I was on the ship for about 2.5 years.
Wow. Like
Yeah.
like just every day you're on the ship, like
Not
moving
every
or
day, but so I was on a special ship. I was on a ship called the USS Blue Ridge, which is different than other ships because it's the admiral's flagship. So the admiral uses that ship to travel around and basically do messages of goodwill and shaking hands, kissing the
Ah,
babies. That's the kind of ship it was. It wasn't
mm.
the kind of normal Navy ship that goes out into the ocean for 6, 9 months at a time and makes boxes.
So you're
And
you're you're on the vibes ship.
I was on the ship that brings the vibes, which is
Yeah.
perfect for me because that's all I want to do is bring vibes. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And yeah, so that was a phenomenal experience. I think for the first 3 months I was on that ship, I think we hit maybe 15 ports. So we went to
Wow.
Japan all the way around back and ended up in Russia and came back down to Japan. I mean, that was just it was amazing.
Wow. What's one of
Yeah.
your best days or best experiences being on that ship or doing whatever you did? Like what's an experience that's really stood out to you?
I have all kind of funny stories from that ship, but I think one of the coolest things was getting to go to the Great Barrier Reef in
Hmm.
Australia. So my ship went to a couple of different islands out in the Pacific, and it went to a little island called New Caledonia, which is a French island, which very few people have ever heard of or been to that island. So that was really cool to get to go someplace in the Pacific that people don't really go to. And then we
Hmm.
went to Australia. So when I got to Australia, we got to hang out in Sydney, and then we got to go to Cairns, and then I got to snorkel on the Great Barrier Reef, and that's just like
Wow.
is an amazing experience. So that was a good experience. Yeah.
I can imagine. You know what? These days you hear a lot of people talk about the ocean and how scary it is, and you see videos and like when it's bad and it's storming, it's real bad. How did you ever have any of those days where like the sea is just like we are gonna eat you alive and you kind of got out of it?
Yeah, so it was a really great experience. So I was working in the medical department on the ship, and yeah, you'd get people that were seasick all the time because you talked about that earlier about people being in Navy but they're seasick. People in
Yeah.
Navy, there's a lot of them that are seasick, which is kind of funny.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's it's interesting when you're traveling on these different seas, these different oceans. The ocean looks different kind of where
Mm.
you are. So sometimes it looks really green, sometimes it's very, very blue, sometimes it's deep blue. So just watching that was amazing. And there were times when we would be leaving Korea, and then my whole medical department would go out and stand kind of on the outside of the ship, and like waves would crash over us, which
Wow.
is dangerous, which do not do, kids. That's
I
not a good
can. Yeah,
idea.
that sounds crazy.
Yeah, so sometimes you would get that. That was kind of neat. And then you would get my ship was rather not a large ship, not as large as an aircraft carrier, but it was large enough so that it didn't really bounce around too much in the ocean, but you would get the nice swells. But I mean, I used to sleep in the very front of the ship, and it felt like being rocked to sleep in your mother's arms. I mean, it was
Oh.
just amazing.
So
Yeah.
even in the worst of worst storms, you
Even the
didn't really
worst,
feel it.
I think that everybody's so tired that they're sleeping. But yeah, you can feel the ship, and sometimes you are walking, and the ship's moving up, so you're walking up, and then all of a sudden you're walking down, kind of thing, because the ship's
Mm.
kind of moving. But yeah,
Yeah, I know a lot of people. I know that to me, I think I love boats, but maybe for like 3, 4, 5 hours. I can be on a yacht, I can be chilling, but to be on there for like weeks on end, and you're just like, if things go bad, I'm in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
yeah, that is true. But that's the other really cool thing about it is you do build that sense of camaraderie because it's you and 600, 1,000 other people on a ship. And so
Yeah.
you're everything. You're running that ship like a little city. So you have, people who do your culinary specialists that work the galley and they do all the food. And you have, your supply folks and you have your folks that make the ship run, your engineers, your medical. So it's like a little city.
Mm,
And so everybody has a responsibility, as they say, like on a ship, you're a firefighter first, right? And
mm.
so we all learn how to fight fires if anything happens. And then you just have to, I mean, I was like totally cool. I was totally opposite. I was like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of the ocean, in the Indian Ocean on a ship right now.
Exactly.
How wild is that?
Yeah.
So it was really great.
You're making the Navy sound so awesome.
The
And
Navy is the Navy is awesome. My nephew just joined the Air Force, and I keep shaking my head and wagging my finger at him. Air Force is fine, but the
yeah.
Navy is just a really special place. I mean, I joined when the tagline was full speed ahead, and I was like, yes, sign
Mm,
me up for that.
mm.
That adventure.
Yeah, let's just go. So, okay, so maybe on the other side of it, what's the toughest part about being in the Navy?
Let me think, because I'm out now. So what was hard? So I think that being away from your family is probably hard,
Mm,
but I don't know if it was hard for my family, just because like we're a really tight unit. And
mm,
from the very beginning, me and my husband have always been like super tight. And so our kids are too. So leaving them was not as big of an issue.
mm-hmm,
I think that the really hard thing is that you are literally working 24 hours a day,
mm,
all the time. And you never really have that time to be not on duty. So I
mm.
think that, kind of looking back at it, I think that I'm learning how to accept slow time, which is hard for me
Mm.
to do,
Yeah.
because being in the Navy, one of the hardest things is that you're always go, 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 go. It's always your
Mm.
adrenaline's pumping, and you're always kind of, living in that fast paced environment,
No, that makes
which,
a lot of sense.
yeah, which, at the end of it, it could kind of, play on your mental health, and kind of, everybody in the Navy, I'm sure, has insomnia. Everybody probably has anxiety, because that 24-hour mentality does kind of breed that. So I think
Mm.
that that's one thing that wasn't great about being in the Navy. But other than that, I loved it.
No, that sounds great. Yeah, because I know there's always pros and cons. So, like, did you have to deal with a lot of like burnout? Like were there just a lot of moments where you felt burnt out by the work?
I think that there were moments where I did feel burnout, but I don't think I recognized it. Like, I think
Mm.
that there was a lot of things that I did not recognize at the time, but now that I'm out, I recognize as being burnout. Um, yes, I think when you're in it, it's harder to kind of recognize it.
Yeah.
I think that the Navy has done a lot in the military period to try to address people's mental health and things like that, more so than what they did when I first joined the military. So, and kind of having that more work-life balance. I
Mm.
think that the military is trying to instill that a lot more. So that will probably help. But yeah, I think that it's difficult to have a work-life balance in the military.
Yeah, because I've never actually thought about that. Like, so what was the longest period in time where you were actually at sea? Like no land in sight. What was the longest spell?
So I was on that special party ship. So it
Hmm.
wasn't a party ship. It's a naval ship. But
Yeah.
so we were only, I think the longest time we were out to sea was because we were during when the Fukushima happened in Japan. Our ship was actually out in Thailand, and so we had to turn around and come back. And so
Mm.
I think we were out to sea for about 2 weeks with not
Mm.
seeing land. But that's unheard of. That's not typical.
Okay.
Typically, my friend was just out to sea, and they can be out there for months at a time, 6 months before seeing any ocean. I mean,
Wow.
for only seeing ocean and not seeing land. So, but me, I picked my ship wisely. and I was
Mm.
not on that kind of ship.
Because I can imagine being on a ship, like the French are saying, 6 months not seeing any land, every day just
Yeah.
waking up seeing a body of water. I would feel sick. I think eventually I'll go crazy. Like I'll be like, I can't deal with this. I need to see
Yeah.
some soil.
Oh, yeah, that's funny because the person, my friend, she's my podcast co-host,
Hmm.
and she's a social worker, and so the Navy started putting social worker on larger ships, which I think is
Ah.
great to get people, things they need. And yeah, so I was the one that told her, I said, go on the ship, you'll be fine, you'll be fine. And she did it and she liked it, but it wasn't like my ship. So I kind of tricked her a little bit.
Oh
She
wow.
was out to sea for 6 months. That
That's
never
a
happened to me.
no. That's a lot. That's a lot. So okay. So how many? Do you know how many countries ballpark that you've actually visited from your experience in the
Oh,
Navy?
probably, I think I counted, it was like 40.
Hmm. 40. Okay, that's
40,
cool.
40 ships. I mean, 40, sorry, guys, I can't, my brain is not
Stations.
working. 40 countries.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you? I don't know if the Navy ever goes to like any African ports, like you end up in South Africa or something. Did that ever happen?
So I'm sure that they do. My ship. So the military typically has the world broken down into different commands,
Hmm.
and so I was working in the Indo Pacific command. So I was over in the Pacific. So
I see.
all my ship only went to places in Asia, but I'm
Mm.
sure that other ships do go different places. I did a lot of work in Africa. Actually, it was just in Africa last 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
I did a lot of work in Africa, but that was with a different job that I was in. It was in the Navy, but it wasn't on the ship. And I've done a lot of work in Africa.
Yeah. What's some of the work that you've done, like in different places?
Oh, so I did. I worked with United Nations, helping different countries get certified for their medical hospitals.
Okay.
So I did that in Kenya. I mean, sorry, what did I say? I did that in Kenya, Rwanda, Senegal, Cape Verde, and Liberia, but I'm doing different work in Liberia and then Egypt. Different work
Nice.
in Egypt though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
So
was what was that your? And that was your first time ever going to like Africa as well?
it was Rwanda was my first time going to Africa. So after I left the ship and I did a bunch of different stuff and I got commissioned. So I went from being enlisted to being an officer.
Hmm.
And my first duty station as an officer was with the Marine Corps again
Mm.
in Camp Lejeune. And I ended up doing a lot of work in NATO. And I got really interested in how to work with foreign partners.
Yeah.
And so I was accepted to go to a global health fellowship at an agency in DC. So when I was in that fellowship, I was managing a big budget for humanitarian assistance work. And I was in charge of AFRICOM, which is Africa,
Yeah.
NORTHCOM, which is North America, and then SOUTHCOM, which is South America. So that's kind of where my work began to kind of veer off and do more kind of international development type work, and
Mm.
particularly in Africa. So after I left that fellowship, I came to San Antonio to work for an organization that takes State Department money and they use that money to train militaries how to do different medical things. So I was putting together teams and they were doing like nursing triage, or they were doing, first aid or gender-based violence or disaster planning, different things like that. So at that job is when I was able to write some curriculum for how to deploy field hospitals for the UN, and I was able
Mm.
to take that out to Rwanda, and that was the first time I went to Africa.
That is so awesome. That's so cool. Well, you've done a lot of
I've
different
done a lot.
ranges of things. Yeah, it sounds like you've lived like 10 lives already. And that's how I'm just like, wow, that's all important work. What were your experiences like going to Africa for the first time?
Oh my gosh. So like two places that just call me home every single time will be anywhere in Africa. Every time I
Hmm.
go to Africa, I feel like I've returned home. And
Yeah.
then every time I go to the Middle East, I feel like I've returned because I love the Middle East.
Mm.
But yeah, when I went to Africa for the first time, well, I went to East Africa the first time, and I was just like, this place is so I just couldn't, like, the beauty
Hmm.
of the people and of the place. It just pulls at your heart in some way that I can't explain.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Senegal for the first time, I went out to the island where they would bring people for the slave trade. Like one of the first points they would, on the slave trade to America from
Hmm.
Africa. And I don't know, that just, like, I don't know. It was an amazing feeling, and just kind of to be standing there where people had been taken into slavery and shipped to America. I mean, it's just crazy. But the big thing that's always interesting to me whenever I go to Africa, like I was just in Liberia, and I think that I've like they've adopted me as their own. Um, just you think about like what would have happened if my life was different and one of my ancestors had not come to America on a slave ship and I would have stayed in Africa.
Yeah.
I always think about that,
Mm. Mm.
and that's just, I don't know. It's just really, it always makes me think about like, how would my life be different?
Yeah, how do you feel when you think about that? Like what kind of feelings come up for you, like, or thoughts, like what comes up for you when you think about, oh, what if actually I never went, or my
Right.
ancestors never went?
I don't know. I always kind of like just feel really humbled.
Mm.
Because there is a lot of adversity, right? There are a lot of things that happen that bad to African American people, but especially when I'm talking to people in Liberia
Mm-hmm.
and in different places, I just kind of see that how their lives are now, and I think they're just so resilient people
Mm-hmm.
that they've lived. Like the people I talk to in Liberia have lived through Charles Taylor, they've lived through the Doe era, they've lived through Ebola, they've lived through COVID, and I'm
Mm.
like, wow, what if that was my family that had to endure these things that are
Yeah.
different than things that we have to endure in America, right? And I
Mm.
just think about that. It just makes me feel overwhelmed with like just love, I guess. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. It's hard to explain. Like I feel like the continent of Africa just puts his arms around me and wraps
Yeah.
me in a hug.
You
You
know what?
know?
Africa is magic. At the
It
end of the day,
is.
that's just it's an unexplainable because it's magic. You know.
Exactly. I can't. People ask me that question all the time, and I cannot. Like also, like when I'm talking about my experience in the Middle East, I can't explain how amazing. I just it. I don't
Mm.
know. It's a very magical place.
What
Yeah.
what's the magic about the Middle East? What was your experience there? Because I've never been to the Middle East. Like, which countries are you in where you felt that, where you feel that, man, where I really love this place?
I was living in Bahrain, which is a small little country off the coast of Saudi Arabia, kind of between Saudi Arabia and
Mhm.
Iran.
They do Formula
And
One there.
I'm sorry.
Formula One. They have a
Yes,
race
well,
in Bahrain.
I have Formula One stories, but yes. So, um, I was in Bahrain and I was managing a portfolio of health portfolio for 14 countries in the Middle East and in North Africa. And I think the diversity of people is not something
Mm.
that I expected.
Interesting.
I don't know what I thought would happen, but when I showed up I went to Oman, I went to Saudi Arabia, I went to Jordan, I went to Egypt, and that was just like people from white, blue eyes to dark
Mm-hmm.
complexion. And I just did not expect that for some reason. So the diversity of people was really amazing. And just the people are really they just kind of accepted me. And like I said, I feel like they put their arms around me. And
Mm.
every time I go to Bahrain, I just feel like that. Like it's a very diverse country. It's pretty moderate country, and people are super nice. And it's just like it's a different way of life. It's much slower.
Yeah.
You get like America. It's a much faster pace. And
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're living someplace, like even when I was in Liberia, like the pace is so much slower
I
that
love
it
that
makes you
pace.
look at your life in a different kind of way and really appreciate different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's just what's really amazing about it. Like I loved going to Oman and learning about like the history of Oman and their history with Tanzania, and it was amazing. And then going to Jordan and kind of hearing about that and being in North Africa, and it just, I don't know. I love it. I love all of it.
I love that you've been to all these places. Like, you know what? Not I don't know that many people that a lot of people will end up going to Dubai, but you never hear many people going to like Bahrain or
Yeah, which are
Oman.
the best places.
Yeah, and I would love to maybe check it out one day actually and just see what it's like. What are the vibes there? That's really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about the podcast that you're talking about.
Oh yes.
It's the Seedy and Shady podcast.
Yes.
What inspired you to start a podcast? And it's about growing seeds and like just selling seeds too, right? Yeah, maybe let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a Seedy and Shady AF,
Hmm.
a sketchy gardening podcast,
I love
and it's
that.
me and my friend Marcella, who's in the Navy with me, and yeah, she's my co-host, and it's all about gardening,
Hmm.
all kinds of gardening. It's about and a lot of environmental issues, conservation, people just kind of working in that space. We've had guests on that talk about native plants, particular to San Antonio. We had the a conservationist from the Botanical Gardens in Norfolk, Virginia, talked to us about their work, and we've had people from all over just talking about all sorts of things.
That's
So
cool.
I think what kind of inspired me, I don't know, like I said before, I don't do things halfway. I do things all the way,
Yeah.
which is dangerous for my brain sometimes because I want to do too many things.
Hmm.
So I kind of started thinking about this idea of a podcast because I love listening to podcasts, but pretty much true crime.
Yeah.
So I was really inspired by Crime Junkies because it's Ashley Flowers and her friend Britt, and they're like best friends, and they just talk about these great and they do great work, you know. And so it's like, I think I could do something like that. I gotta find somebody
Hmm.
to be my host, my co-host. And so then I just kind of started thinking about this idea. I always feel like I was looking for podcasts on gardening, and there's some, but not a lot. But there was none that I
Hmm.
wanted to hear. And so I think if you want to make something, if you want to hear something, you got to make it
Yeah.
sometimes, right? Like there's not going to be that content out there if you don't make it. And so that's kind of what inspired me to just, I have to do it. If I get something in my brain, I have to see it through fruition.
I love that. So is that something you like more so concentrated on? Because I know you said you retired from the Navy some time ago, like a little bit ago. Was that something that like after your retirement, like, hey, when I retire, this is something I want to do,
No,
or did it just kind of come up?
I did it. I just retired very recently, like back in April, and I've had this podcast
Ah,
we're going on our third season. So,
nice.
it's just me, my brain works that way. I'll be like, I should do a podcast. And then I'm like, next thing I know, I'm planning a podcast. And the next thing I
Hmm.
know, I'm finding a co-host, and then I'm actually doing it. you
Yeah.
know?
Have you always been
So
interested in gardening? Like, is that something that's like a part of your life? Like everywhere you've been, you just like grow a little garden somewhere?
yeah, so when I was living in Japan, I got really interested in gardening just because it's like people garden everywhere in Japan, and the part of
Hmm.
Japan I lived in was not super. It's maybe like an hour and a half south of Tokyo, but I
Okay.
lived even a little bit further south than that on a peninsula, and it's all like where there's lots of farmland. So
Hmm.
there was lots of farming going on, and then I would go to the grocery stores and see like all the little baby plants, and I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. So I'll just buy it and try to keep it alive. And like I said, I don't do anything halfway. So once I started learning, I had to really learn.
Hmm.
So then I had a garden in Japan, I had a garden in North Carolina, kind of learned a lot there. Never really thought of myself as much of a gardener. And then I came here, and now my life is consumed by squash that
Nice.
I have everywhere in my yard. And so, yeah, I never really thought of myself as a gardener. I really don't like the outdoors. I'm scared of
Hmm.
like caterpillars. I know my kids say I talk a lot of shit for somebody who's scared of caterpillars, and it's true. Um, yeah, I really don't like anything outside,
Yeah.
which is always amazes my mom that I'm out there.
Yeah. I also hate
Um,
everything outside. I hate bugs. I ain't gonna lie. I'm not an outdoorsy person at
I,
all,
you know,
unless if I'm on the beach.
I'm not. I hate the beach. It's funny. I don't like the beach. I don't like the outdoors. But it's funny because my mom said that. So my grandmother and my grandfather were fishermen, and my uncles are all fishermen. So my mom said that my grandmother was a great fisherwoman, but she always tried to have a garden, and she just was terrible. Like she was terrible. Couldn't
Hmm.
grow anything. So I kind of feel like maybe some of that was in me already, and I didn't know it until I actually
Hmm.
started, getting into gardening. Like fishing is something that seems like I my brain can't sit long enough to fish, you
Yeah.
know. So I got to be moving around. So yeah.
No, that's so cool. Yeah, I mean, you carrying on. Yeah, you know what? I love that though. We don't have to do everything, but I guess there's always something in us that's like you have. There's a latent talent or there's a latent
Yeah.
interest in something that maybe your forefathers, had, and now it's coming out, in you, and you're carrying on that gardening thing that maybe your grandma couldn't end up doing it. That
Exactly.
so that's now you. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Yeah, the Seedy and Shady AF podcast. That's so awesome. I'm gonna tune into some episodes and hear some cool stuff. I
Yeah,
wanna
please
check it out.
do. Please
So
everybody listen. And we're gonna start our third season. We're gonna start recording in the next couple weeks. So
is it on like just Spotify and Apple?
yes.
Okay. Nice. Cool. Okay, so lastly here, I know that Casey said something about you have thoughts about like generational wealth and you have she says that yes, someone to talk to about that. Like so what I don't know what she was alluding to, but I was like, "Oh, that would be cool." Like so what's your thought process on generational wealth?
So, the funny thing is when she wrote that, I was like, girl, what? Me? I was like, you want me to talk what? And so I was sitting here trying to figure out what she's talking about. But I think it's just because So like I said, my family, like I'm lucky that my immediate family, even my extended family, but my immediate family, my husband and my two kids, we are like the best team I ever wanted to be on. You know what
Mm.
I mean? It's like a little tight team and it's just great. And so I think, me and my husband, after we had the boys, we really started thinking about legacy
Mm.
a lot. So I think so when we're talking about generational wealth, people typically think about that, how do you secure wealth for your future generations, right? So if
Yeah.
you own a business or you buy land, how do you, set up wills and trust and that sort of thing to make sure that that wealth goes, in your family. Um, and so I think that just what happened to me one day is I just realized that rich people are rich because they do this stuff.
Mm.
And then they make it seem like it's hard or unattainable for just normal people to achieve. And I don't think that that's the case.
Mm.
Um, I know that there are definitely historical reasons and there's issues around why some people may have more than other people. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think, in terms of generational wealth, there's kind of three things that I've always thought about it. One, somebody has to do it. And so it should be you to start.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because if you look back, like when I started looking around and I was like, man, this family's had this land in it for 700 years or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, that means that somebody had to buy it.
Yeah. It had to start somewhere.
It had to start somewhere. So I believe, hey, it could start with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the second thing is it's not unattainable.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can do something to make sure that their families are taken care of, right? As you
Mm.
go on through the generations. And then the third thing I think about it is generational wealth is not just all to do with money and finances. I think there's so many other things that you can give to your kids, right?
Yeah.
Skills, education, values, things how to do, just
Mm.
give them that knowledge, make them get off of their iPhones or their, things, and learn how to sew, learn how to cook. That sort of stuff is also ways that you can build those customs and that tradition into your family, which I think is also
Mm.
important,
Yeah.
not just the financial aspects of it.
Mm.
Did that answer your question?
It did. I've actually never thought about generational wealth as more of something. To me, I guess it was because of the name. It always sounds like it has to be monetary or like some value, like land, a house. But I've actually never thought about generational wealth as a custom. As a like, for example, with you, right? For you, a big value for you is traveling and wonder and seeing the world and learning about the world and all that, right? And that's something that you've done, and I'm sure that's something you've instilled in your children. Like,
Yes.
you are, a global citizen. You can't, you have to have that wonder, you have to have that curiosity, and then maybe, as they've grown up, when they have their own families, they're gonna pass down the same value
Yes.
that started from you, and that's kind of like how, and then your generation is just gonna be children or people that have that wonder
Yes.
and have that. I can't just be in one place. I have to know what's out there. I have to also know, like, I have to embrace difference. I have to embrace,
Yes.
other people. I have to embrace. So I think that's also part of generational wealth, like those great qualities,
Yes.
right?
Yes, that's the way that I think of it. I think that all of that kind of like it's about the traditions that carry on, right?
Hmm.
And instilling that confidence in your children also, and,
Yeah.
and they'll be fine. They're gonna be okay. You know what I mean? We're gonna build it. And I think people also, one thing that we do a little different in my family. So my kids are 19 now,
Mm-hmm.
and even when they were coming up, they were being homeschooled, and I never really pressured them to leave home necessarily.
Mm.
So instead of the dialogue in my family being, we're going to take this money, you take your money and you buy a house, and you take your money and you do this. It's all like, how can we concentrate those resources, right?
Yeah.
How can we take all of our money and pool it? And so maybe we can all live in one house, and then we can buy land, and then we can put 2 houses on that land, and then we can have it go to our grand. So like thinking about things in a little bit different way than I think that people typically think about things. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we really concentrate on building our family. I try to so I kind of think of like building like a dynasty, right? If I was a queen or a king, how would I think about building this dynasty around my family? And so that's
Yeah.
kind of the way that I think of generational wealth.
Mm.
And that it's totally attainable. And like you said, it's not always wealth. I think monetary things. I think one thing that my mother did, but was really brilliant on her part, is when I was a kid, she spent the money, or her and my aunt to have me go to private school.
Mm.
So that was just an investment that she made, right, in me
Yeah.
when I was a child. And so that private school education that I had, and then I went to public school, made a lot of the difference in my life.
Mm.
So it's like that sort of thing, right? Thinking, hey, maybe this is something that my mom, she went to high school, a little bit of college, but she wanted me to go to college, right? So she really instilled that love of education and reading and really invested that. And so that paid off, right? Because then
Yeah.
I was able to go to college, so like that sort of thing. I think it's just thinking about wealth a little bit broader.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you know what? That's one of my dreams as well. At some point, is I always tell my friends this. They think I'm crazy. I always say, you know what, guys? Why can't we just put our money together, buy a piece of land, build houses, especially if we're still like living out in the West, and like build a little cul-de-sac, right? Where like we have each, we have a little neighborhood, and our children kind of grow up together and like just meet in the middle, play in the middle, and have that sense of community. Because back in Africa, that's really sometimes a given. Like you grow up kind of close to your cousins, you grow up close to your, depending, like that community vibe is there, but here it's not really as present. So
Yeah, it isn't. And I think a lot of people are trying to go back to that. And it's like, interesting that you said that, because like growing up in my small town, I kind of knew, I grew up in a small town. So I know my cousins and it was really close. And I kind of wanted my kids to have something like that,
yeah.
but to build their own family and like, their own friends. And like, I think that community is something that's super important. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that also a lot of people are thinking, hey, we want to do like homesteading. We want to, buy land and put houses on it, but they think that it's unattainable. It's not. It's for you. Somebody just has to do it.
Exactly.
You know what
Someone
I
has to
mean?
just organize you guys and like,
Somebody
okay,
just has to do it, and
yeah,
somebody has to go 100% all in.
yeah,
I think a couple of the other things. So, like I said, if people are thinking about generational wealth as far as monetary things, there's kind of three things that I was thinking about that I think are really important. One, I think get financial literacy
mm.
from day one. Like I started, even when my kids were very, very little, they would get money. So
Mm-hmm.
say they would get $5 and they'd be in a store and they would say, can I buy a toy? And I said, you can take your $5 and buy a toy, but if you put your money in the bank, I will match you $5, which is, you're not going to get that. That's the bank of mom. That's the best rate you're going to get around there, right?
Yeah.
It's 100% match from your mom. So if you save your $5, I will match you $5, and now you have 10, but you have to save it.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, my kids are probably like 3-4 years old.
Mm.
Just little stuff like that. Talk to kids about money. I think it's really important. And if you're not financially literate, there's ways to get that information for free, and just try to make sure that your kids understand things about credit, understand about buying houses, understand about how the economy works, just basic things about, investing. I think that the information is out there. Like I said, somebody just has to go get it and has to get your kids excited about that sort of thing, because that makes a lot of the difference.
How's that manifested into like your children now? Like when you started teaching them that at 3-4, like has that shown up in any way?
They're pretty good with money.
Okay.
And they get it. They get like saving, and they understand why it's important. They will splurge every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that they have a really good relationship with the money.
That's good.
It's not a scary topic for them, and so they're open about talking about it. I think that me and my husband have tried to make it so that our kids are not going to have much debt.
Mm.
And I think that's a great thing you can do for your kids, if you can set them up. And I mean, one thing that parents can do is, if you have good credit score, you can get your kid signed on as an authorized user on your credit card.
Mm.
I think we started when our kids were about 12. And
Okay.
so it looks like they've been building credit history since they were 12 years old. And they didn't even have the cards. I had the cards. So that's one little thing that people can do. Hey, go get your kid a credit card and keep it. And then when you're making purchases or have them make purchases, they're building credit, building history. Another really good thing, it was funny. I started doing this with my kids, but then I read that Jay-Z, of Beyonce and Jay-Z,
Yeah.
also does this.
It's actually really smart.
Yeah. So a really good thing you can do is get your kid an IRA and pay them for the work they do, right? So talk to your tax professional, which will not be Shannon, about this. So me and Lutzer are not telling you to go out and do this, right? We're just saying talk to your tax professional. But if your kid makes any money, like my kids they had little businesses that I helped them start, and they would make money, and then I would put that money in an IRA. So if they made $100, I would put $100 in the IRA from the time they were 12. So they start building these retirement accounts when you're 12. 13, 14 years old, even 18, 19 years old. The younger, the better, because you have nothing but time,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think that my kids kind of realize that now, that they started so early that now they're in a good position to come in, take over these things and build that
Wow.
generational wealth, right? Like
Yeah.
me, when I think of investing, I tell my kids all the time, I have portfolio's, right? Different places I've been investing, but that's not my money. That's for my grandchildren. You
Mm.
know, it's the
Yeah.
time. So
That's that
I just
generational wealth.
it's that generational wealth. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to be able to spend it, but how are they going to be able to, how am I going to be able to make it so that when they land is a softer land?
Mm.
We don't have to struggle
Yeah.
for generations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a ton of money to do these things. Just it takes somebody just kind of thinking about it a little bit.
You are doing such an awesome job. I have to say, you are doing an amazing and an awesome job.
I'm trying.
That's so. I know you're doing it. I don't even think you're trying anymore. You're actually doing it. That's really awesome. That's inspired me. Like I actually hadn't thought about doing things like that, but it's easy and it's such a smart way to really set yourself up, your kids up, your grandchildren up. Like why not, right? That's
Right,
what the
right.
your point about Jay-Z and Beyonce. That's what the wealthy people are doing.
That's what they're doing. I found out that Jay-Z hired his daughter to cry on his album and paid her. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can do that, right? So like when my kids were making any money, I was taking that and I was putting in their IRA. But I mean, that's talk to your tax professional. But those are things you can do. There's lots of ways, and like people, I know it's hard. And I understand that everybody's not going to be able to necessarily, do that. And I get it. But I will say that if any amount of money, if you can open an account for a child when they're born, and if you put $5 a month, that
Mm-hmm.
you have time on your hands. Just think about it in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be back breaking too. Like you said, it could be just $5 or even $2. It's a
Right, right.
start, and then
And even
as
if and
time,
even if
yeah,
you can't invest in them monetarily, you can always invest in them with educations of some sort, and which is or experiences,
mm-hmm.
which is very important as well. So
Take them to the library, give them a National Geographic, and you never know.
exactly, you might end up in the Navy.
Yeah, right, right, right. Well, you know what, Shannon? I think that's a great place to end the podcast. I really appreciate you, talking about your life experiences, and it's been so fun learning more about you. I could talk to you all day. I feel like there's so much more that I could hear about from just your experiences. And maybe, maybe I'll be on the Seedy and Shady AM
Yes,
podcast,
just want
and
to talk about your
you know,
journey.
we'll talk about some plans and other things. So I'll definitely love that. But yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to just come on the podcast as well and just talking about you and your life. I haven't had any conversation with anyone who's been in the Navy before, so this was very eye opening for
Very
me.
cool.
So I've loved learning about it. So I thank you so much for being on the platform.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful. And listener, thank you so much, and we will catch you on the next one.